Hannah 1.
Claire 2.
Gen 3.
Steven 4.
Steven 4. What? We have a guest today? This is awesome. So today we've invited one of our friends to join this panel discussion because he inspired the topic. If you have been a Frameform listener from the start or you've checked out our archives, you may remember our friend Steven Butler, who we interviewed in season 1. And it's about time we have him back with us. So thank you so much for making the time and also being the inspiration for today's conversation.
Thank you for having me. I love my Frameform family. Excited to get this thing started.
Yay! So probably about a year ago, I was lamenting that, maybe the time has passed and there would be no second golden age of musicals. And I was like, I just don't think it can be done anymore. And you made the brilliant comment that superhero movies were the new musical genre in a way, and the new version of that. And the funny thing is I marinated on that on like an almost daily basis for months. And then I texted you about it and you're like, wait, what did I say? So do you want to share a little bit about that perspective? Because, I am not someone who's seen a lot of Marvel movies or DC movies or is versed in the multiverses, but clearly you're someone that has some familiarity if you can make that sort of insight. So what is that brilliant idea that you had?
I don't know how brilliant it was, just an observation. But I guess the original the idea came from the fact that, movies go through these, especially theater movies go through these like cycles of what's popular and what's a spectacle that people want to see, and during that time when the musicals were super popular, it was because they wanted to see these big, grandiose stages and 200 dancers and beautiful choreography and Fred Astaire doing some crazy routine. And then, you go through history of cinema, you can go through the 80s where it became like action movies and Rambo and Stallone, and it came the 90s where it became buddy cop movies. Or, skip the 80s stuff with E.T. and all the sci-fi and sort of event movies. But then now we're at this place where I think with film, you've seen pretty much everything that could possibly be seen in real life, right? And you can see it every day on your phone, too. So what's the stuff that you can't see? That's, you can't see Spider-Man. And if you think about those old movies, like the old Superman movies, they were great at the time, but they never really actually, for a kid that likes comic books, they never really matched what you had in your head. You'd go see those movies and it's like, okay, this is kind of cheesy, but I'm just going to suspend disbelief so I can enjoy this movie. But, I think with the Marvel stuff, it's like you get to see Spider-Man look like Spider-Man. You get to see Batman look like Batman and do all the cool stuff and fly around, and the Hulk really looks like the Hulk and all that stuff. I think that's the thing that makes it the new musical, because people are excited to see those things that they want to see. They've been wanting to see since they were little kids.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's an element of, I don't want to say seriousness necessarily, but I think that there's an element of realism that's imbued into these comic book stories of old that, even though you're suspending disbelief, you're able to buy into what's happening a little bit more easily. I'm just thinking comparing the Adam West Batman from the 1960s, which was very, very campy, enjoyably so, to the Christopher Nolan Batman, where you're using the same source material, but you're revealing different things or different elements about each, about that material, depending. I think Christopher Nolan, I don't necessarily want to tie the Marvel, movement to him directly, because I know Batman's not Marvel, but he showed that telling these stories could make the audience seriously question themes of justice, of heroism, of ethics. And I think that was really the door opening to what we're seeing today.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the Christopher Nolan Batman series, because when this big boom of superhero movies kind of started, I think was before 2010, but right before 2010. And I remember because I was seeing them in theaters. I went to see The Dark Knight. I went to see Iron Man in theaters, but I haven't seen anything since. And part of that is interest and phase of life. and saturation. And there are very few that I actually still want to see. I want to see Deadpool because I know that it's a different take on things. It was filmed in Vancouver. Ryan Reynolds is from like really close to my hometown. So I have these personal reasons where I'm like, okay, I'll see that one. But it got to a point where I was like, there's how many of these? And they connect what? Like how many different ways? And I just kind of checked out because I was like, I'm never going to catch up. And, there's only so much time that we have in this life. And I might not spend it watching any of these. Do you all have any favorite like DC Marvel characters or movies that you've seen specifically?
I liked Deadpool. I saw that. I enjoyed Doctor Strange, but I think I enjoyed that more for the VFX involved in that. And Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
I was like, which one? Upside Down Kiss Spider-Man or
As well as Into the Spider-Verse, because that's just like hands down amazing. I don't know if we could count that because that's more animation, but yeah, I liked those. Oh, and the first Wonder Woman was fun. I enjoyed that one.
Which one was the first one? Like the first one with Gal Gadot, like the relaunch, or is there another first one? Okay.
Yeah, her first one. The second Wonder Woman that took place in DC was terrible.
Was it worse than She-Hulk though?
That's a Disney show, right?
I've only seen clips and I was like, is this for real?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I think I'm also a huge fan of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and think that those are brilliant takes on the material, but it's also not necessarily something that I'd lump into the sort of the Marvel franchise as it's been building over the last decade or so. As far as that goes, the first movie I saw in theaters was the Avengers, like the original Avengers. This was like maybe 2 weeks before I graduated college, so that was a long time ago.
Not 2 years.
Right before graduation, I'm gonna go see the Avengers.
It was the only thing playing at the outdoor drive-in theater of the town that we were in at the time, so we were slim pickings there. And I think I saw an Iron Man movie at some point. I can't remember which one. It didn't exactly resonate with me, but there's kind of an element, and I mean, I consider myself a part of this too. There's certainly an element of fandom, or in this case, like sort of a studio constructed fandom around these kinds of movies, in that they're constructing this idea that you do have to see every single movie essentially to understand what is happening with the finer plot points of, like, say, Endgame. Like, I mean, I haven't seen Endgame, but everybody I knew who went in cold without seeing any movie had absolutely no idea what was going on, because you basically have had to see like 8 films before that in order to get the context for what's being created. And I mean, there are elements of fandom that are, very, things that I love, like as someone who's, a longtime Doctor Who fan, just being able to connect with others about not only, the show itself, but also sort of the lore behind the show itself and the possibilities of, what kinds of stories that are possible within this universe that has, almost impossible parameters. And so there is like sort of a connection that builds organically from that. And I think that, with the big studio money pushing these films at the front and center, I think that there's a huge element of that that's, I mean, I don't want to say being forced on us, but one that's very much by design.
I would like to say, too, that, so we go back to favorite Marvel movies. Iron Man's one of my favorites, but then also Captain America Winter Soldier and Black Panther is probably my, absolute favorite. Yeah.
I also like Black Panther. Thank you.
I usually go with the directors. So, the ones that are the best are the ones that are usually by indie directors. So Jon Favreau did the first Iron Man, and he sort of, humanized the character and made him relatable to a lot of people. And same thing with, who's the other one?
Ryan Coogler?
It's Ryan, yes. And, I mean, he's an indie director as well, because he did what's the movie called with the Creed? Yeah, he did Creed. I mean, that was a lower budget, not lower budget, but like it was a medium budget film.
He also did Fruitvale Station, which I think is so underrated.
Yes, it's really hard to watch, but it's a really, really good film. And you think about Jon Favreau's first film, Swingers and Made, those are super indie, low budget films, so they know how to tell a story and really get an audience to like put themselves in the shoes of the characters. And if you can do that with all this extra stuff and, special effects, what it really ends up being is a really expensive indie film. I think the same thing with the Batman franchise, at least the Dark Knight franchise, the same way. Yeah, it's like you're really telling a small story with all the extra bells and whistles that they can use. So, and I think it was the same way with a lot of the musicals back then too. You have like someone like Busby Berkeley that's just a visionary that's able to like create these really amazing mosaic like dance scenes. But I think he would probably be able to do that with or without all the crazy costumes and everything like that. It might just may not look as good,
For sure. I think good ideas are priceless, and, they might be really expensive to make a certain kind of movie, but you can't buy ideas necessarily the same way that, a true genius mind can generate them. That's a good segue to my next kind of warm-up question before we dive into more layers of this topic. For all of you, what are some of your favorite movie musicals or musical genre productions?
My favorite of all time is Bye Bye Birdie. It's just a sweet, silly Dick Van Dyke musical. State Fair, also another good one. I don't know, there's just so many. I mean, I grew up with musicals because my grandma just entertained me with them. So there's too many to count.
It was like your family's version of the iPad. Like, we're just going to put on a musical and sit little Hannah down, and she'll be occupied for an hour and a half.
I mean, definitely with my grandma, yeah.
I love that.
Put that VHS in.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't know if this is stretching the notion of musical, but I really got drawn into the Beatles movies when I was younger. And, I mean, they're more like, they're essentially fronts for album promotion, but being able to, see, I guess, four early 20-something, late teenage boys just completely losing it to one of their songs was, something really, there's something that's really infectious about that. And I guess it has to do with sort of like the process of just like living and also, creating at the same time that drew me in. I was also really into, I remember I got really into Umbrellas of Cherbourg as well when I was growing up. And just I guess sort of the approaching a musical with a pacing that, and an approach that I really wasn't used to seeing. And then there were like the ones that I learned like jazz class, and which, quite frankly, I like them. I was drawn into them at the time mostly because I was learning the dances to them. And I think that, participation is a big part of being, drawn into these, like Chicago and, like Sweet Charity. Learning Rich Man's Frug and seeing the, Shirley MacLaine, watching the dancers in the club at the same time. I think there's a participatory element that, drew me closer to films I wouldn't say I ended up liking, but films I'd watch over and over and over.
I love those Fosse ones too. Sweet Charity, Chicago, what else?
I still haven't seen All That Jazz.
You have to see that.
That's been at the top of my list for forever.
It's so weird, but so good.
I need to see that too. I almost rented it at the library and I forgot what happened. I think I think they couldn't track it down for some odd reason.
I have a copy. I have a DVD if you want.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I have a DVD player.
Yay, millennials.
It's a Blu-ray.
That's a very adult film. It's It's really interesting, all that jazz. Yeah. What else is good? Oh, my favorite probably is Singing in the Rain. I think that's probably the ultimate musical. Some of the best things that have ever been filmed, best dances that have ever been filmed, I think, in my opinion. I'm trying to think of something that's maybe more recent. I do like Baz Luhrmann stuff. I don't know if you consider those musicals, but I really like most of his films, especially Romeo and Juliet and the other one. What's the
Moulin Rouge.
Moulin Rouge? Yeah.
How
Yeah.
about Elvis? I guess that would kind of be like in that transitional space of like it's a movie about music. It has musical elements, but it's not like based on a stage musical. Did you like Elvis? Or
I did like it. I mean, it's a tragic story, but it was good. Yeah. And you know that one of the Seaweed sisters, I believe, choreographed it, I thought. Or was his Elvis coach? I thought Dana was.
I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. I was on a flight a few days ago and I looked over and I'm always like, I'm not creepy about it, but it'll catch my eye what people are watching and I'll be like, oh, does that kind of like match up what I would think that person would watch? And there was this girl in the row in front of me who's probably like 11 years old or something and she was watching Singing in the Rain. And I was so happy. And my husband's a tap dancer, so I like tapped him on the side. I was like, elbowed him. And I was like, oh my God, she's watching Singing in the Rain. And I kind of kept looking over because I like wanted to somewhat watch it, even though I was watching something else. And she fast forwarded the scene where he is singing in the rain, but she watched, I guess because it wasn't colorful enough, but I almost was like, don't you dare. But she watched everything else. Like she loved all this, like the ensemble scenes and the colors. So I mean, watching some of that movie is better than watching none of that movie. But I just was like the irony that like that scene, she's like, this is boring. It's just a guy singing in the rain.
Or maybe she's seen it so many times. I mean, that's a famous scene.
I guess, yeah. Maybe.
That could have been that moment where she's like, I've exhausted this moment.
Yeah, we'll give her that grace.
Yeah. Before I saw the film, I thought the movie was more about that scene, and I didn't, because I didn't see it until I think when I was at dance college, OCU. I think I saw it there, and I was like, oh, I can't wait for this movie. I love that one scene that I've seen, and I was like, this isn't Singing in the Rain. This is like a meta film about filmmaking, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's excellent. And I think a good like double bill for that would be to maybe watch something like The Artist, cuz like they're aesthetically very different, but there's similar themes and references.
Or even that Babylon movie is kind of the same thing too. Have you seen
Haven't seen it yet.
I need to see it.
But yeah.
I need to see it.
It's
Yeah.
really good. It's you have to give it patience. You have to have some patience when you watch it though. Yeah.
That's like, so, comparing with seeing Avengers Endgame, I'd rather study up to get the references in Babylon than I would to like watch all the movies preceding Endgame. But as far as like my favorite musical movies, anything with Gene Kelly, I just love his style of dancing, his choreography, and he's a genius. Like I have even more respect for people that don't just have like the physical talent and the magnetic charisma and the ability to act and dance and sing and do all that, but he's just, as a director, is amazing too. And I think if I were to like, in Carl Sagan's Cosmos, they talk about like specific music they sent out to space to aliens. If I could send out like a movie clip to the aliens, it would be the scene from CoverGirl where he's dancing with his ego, or it's like they had to shoot it. There was no special effects, so they had to shoot the exact same scene twice, and he and Stanley Donen, like his main collaborator, had to like get the camera movement exact, and he danced the same routine, like slightly different choreography, so he was basically partnering himself. Like, it's just mind-blowing. So anything with Gene Kelly, but especially that scene. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, still one of my favorites. And I know none of you guys agree with me, but West Side Story, especially the 2021 version. And then anything that's like newer, I tend to like stuff that's more reflexive and self-aware. Like Schmigadoon on Apple Plus is pretty good. And then like stuff that South Park and Family Guy and Bob's Burgers do. I would say especially Family Guy, because Seth MacFarlane's actually a really good composer. And it's ridiculous, but it's kind of, I mean, musicals are ridiculous in their own way. And it's just really like self-aware of the form and calls out a lot of the traditional things with a fresh perspective. So, yeah.
Are you gonna see that new movie, Dicks?
Oh,
Sorry to
yes.
bring
I'm absolutely seeing it.
I have
Talking about
not
it.
heard of it.
Musical.
What is this?
Oh,
It's like
well,
a new movie from like that. It started as an Upright Citizens Brigade sketch that's now an A24 movie. And just watch the trailer.
just watch the
If it-
trailer.
If it's A24, I'll see it. They have my trust.
Yep. Also, I just wanted to add in Flight of the Conchords. I loved that show.
Oh
so
yeah,
much.
100%. I've been rewatching that recently.
That's vintage.
Yes, and
That's
just I'm
good.
also a huge fan of Our Flag Means Death, and I just get tickled that Murray is now a pirate captain.
So before we I definitely wanted to like talk about what our favorites were in each of like the kind of genres we're talking about today. But before that, Stephen, you were focusing on like directors. And as far as cinema goes, one of the most revered directors, I think, you know, that most people agree, a very highly revered director is Martin Scorsese. And he's someone that came out pretty openly about being critical of Marvel and DC and those sorts of movies. And he called these theme park movies the death of cinema. And he said that there's value in them, you know, but it's just not it's not what made him fall in love with movies. He said they're market research, audience tested, verified, vetted, modified, revetted, and remodified until they're ready for consumption. Basically like a highly, highly produced product rather than a highly refined artistic product. So do you all agree with that sentiment? Did you remember when that kind of he came out and that sort of rocked the cinematic discourse?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the interview itself because I think it was and still is behind a paywall, but I definitely saw sort of the fallout from it from a lot of people either using it as, you know, a weapons saying, oh, this is, you know, one of the legends saying like these new rounds of movies aren't doing it right versus people saying like, oh, how dare you? Like how, you know, this is like just another form of elitism, whereas these movies are reaching a vast, you know, a huge audience that many haven't really, and making like figures that people haven't really conceived of before. But also, I just want to say like franchise releases are nothing new. I mean, just thinking even back to the movie musicals, it's just how many of them were released not only in, you know, multiple iterations or featured maybe the same duo essentially playing the same characters but in different situations, but you also have this, you know, the serialization of certain movies and certain musicals, but even going way back to the mid 18th century. And I mean, I'm just thinking this because I saw Lohengrin last night and thinking of, you know, Wagner and his creation of, you know, operas in the mid 1800s. And I mean, there's a lot of problematic things about Wagner, and specifically when it comes to the way his music was weaponized and how he would love to have for his music to be weaponized. And some of it, but his music is considered, you know, the work of a genius, but it also, each opera was a total spectacle. And even just thinking of The Ring specifically, you have essentially four 4-hour operas set together. That essentially is Marvel right there. This is a serialization of, you know, a series of works that, you know, have a bajillion characters that you have to keep track of, that you really have to see every iteration of in order to get the next version. But that music, I mean, maybe just because of the sort of rarefication or the, you know, of the form itself, is considered masterpiece and still holds up today. Now, I mean, quality doesn't necessarily run through every franchise, but, you know.
Well, there's definitely an element of like proof of concept. If something's successful in one field, or if you have like one piece of a series that works, they make more. I mean, Harry Potter's a great example. There's how many million movie not million, but there's how many movies made about it now, and it started with one book.
There's a play, there's a whole, there's Potterworld, the whole simulation.
And now there's a musical of it, right?
And I mean, I think that a lot of the Harry Potter fandom, or sorry, I don't want to say fandom necessarily all the time, but I think a lot of what drew people to Harry Potter, the book, in a way, was this world that was being created, this sort of alternate reality that, not only was this other, fantastical realm, but one that was only one step away from our own. And I think that that's a huge component of the success of Marvel movies, in that we aren't necessarily putting these superheroes in this rarefied air of, oh, these people are invincible. These are people who have powers, but they also have problems. Like Tony Stark is, chronically depressed. We have Tom Holland, who is, just struggling as a, kid in Queens, but he's also, Spider-Man. And that also relates to a lot of the movie musicals that we saw particularly during the Great Depression. So we see people embodying these, sort of the everyday, and then finding themselves in this, completely different scenario, and essentially telling the audience, like, hey, this isn't far away from your reality, and convincing them to buy in.
Yeah, I think going back to the Scorsese thing, I kind of agree with him, but I also don't agree. I think part of the thing he's talking about is that when you do all this market testing and the movie becomes about how many toys you can sell, those things are in the movie. They have to make sure these things are written into the script. It's this scene has to have this thing. You see it a lot in Star Wars too. It's with all the the Mandalorian and stuff. But when it comes to the word cinema, when you create something from artistic standpoint, or you have a theme, the Marvel movies do all the things that are right as far as quote unquote cinema, making a movie, and that's why they hire these great directors, because they can make something that shouldn't be good on paper really, really good and emotional, right? But I feel what's missing is the indie films and the screenwriter that just decides to write some story from their perspective that still gets a decent sized budget, that we get to, we're not seeing these new movies from interesting screenwriters and interesting directors, because these movies have 10 screenwriters and possibly 2 directors, because one gets fired and then they bring on another. It's I think it's too much of art by committee, and less of creating something from a real artistic standpoint.
I think an ironic thing about Scorsese calling them theme park movies is literally Disney went ahead and bought Marvel as well. And Disney has theme parks and is building out all these different environments, including Harry Potter, which we talked about, which is not Marvel, but it's an outgrowth of the same thing. And Star Wars. So it's interesting how these worlds are becoming more interactive. There's this concept of vertical integration that's as old as the movie industry, but then now you have it with streaming platforms and the costumes and the toys and the theme parks, and it's all a big money-making machine, but also a big experiential machine that I think is trying to speak to audiences in a way that I don't think would necessarily work with something like a movie musical genre. It's pretty well suited to fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, and Disney honestly is the one that really pushed it more. I mean, Star Wars did it in the very beginning when that came out, and Spaceballs has that joke where they really lean into it with down to the, Spaceballs, the toilet paper. So I think that's what I disliked when everything was getting purchased by Disney, and we're seeing oh, this is a marketing thing in the film. I heard that first year in Star Wars owned by Disney, and seeing characters that had a spotlight moment, and they were selling plushies of those things. And then the same thing going with Marvel, where it's just that's where it starts to get damaging, and you see exactly what you said, Steven, a script by committee of people, and going into the focus groups. I think that's where we kind of lose that sparkle. And Scorsese saying, theme park films. I mean, I think maybe prior to that, I wouldn't say it would be called a theme park film once we get the business involved in all of this. Because these films, honestly, exactly what you were saying, Claire, back to like the Great Depression when all these superheroes were coming out in the 1940s, when Superman, when Wonder Woman, and so on, were, going through some heavy stuff, and then all of a sudden they get these fantastical elements to make the world a better place. And it's like watching one long TV special. You gotta find out who they all are, what they're all about, to get to, season finale and understand what the hell is going on. And that's where we are in the age of streaming or just TV watching in general, because we're so invested by this long form storytelling that keeps us going and connected and kind of creating a community with other people, because we've been so devoted for so long that we connect and understand what this is all about.
Yeah, the culture of consumption's definitely changed around all of it. And I think it also, the attitude towards these sorts of source materials has changed too. Like I remember, and I'm not just saying this because I like the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight better than the others, but I think that the feelings around it is like initially they were seen as somewhat lowbrow, and like literally, I mean, all of us here have probably seen Entourage at some point, and it was like a joke that they would make Aquaman a movie, and now it's like they're on Aquaman like 3 or 4, but it's Jason Momoa, so people will see it. But now I found, like, I always listen to the Hollywood Reporter roundtables, and last year especially, most of the roundtables I listened to, even if there wasn't one of these movies that was being highlighted in it, there were actors and actresses from those movies, or there was talk about it, even just in like a flippant way where it's like, oh, I'd love to get into, like, as a career milestone, I'd love to be in one of those like Marvel movies. And I don't know if it's really like an artistic goal as much as it's like, then I would be set for life and my family would be set for life. And it's maybe more of like a financial thing where like the stigma has fallen away from it. So it's like, yeah, of course I'll do that. Like, it's not even selling out. It's just a smart move. But it also might just be like, I would love to be a superhero since there are like 200 people in this industry that are doing it already.
Yeah. I mean, as, someone in an artistic business, as everybody here can probably attest to, like, it's nice to have a bit of fun and escapism in between, like, those, heavily researched, heavily rehearsed and heavily poured through scene studies that you do on the side. But there's an element, and this goes for all major Hollywood releases, in that, there is an obviously an outward facing element and, a desire to attract audiences to the film. And I think that Marvel, for better or for worse, kind of elevates that to fan service in a way where they take so much of what the fan response is and incorporate it into future properties, which again gives the audience idea that they're kind of participating or that they have a say in the direction. I mean, particularly with social media. And in some ways it can make someone feel like, oh, hey, I'm being heard by this industry that, has frequently felt very distant. But at the same time, it also is creating this atmosphere, and this atmosphere of it's cultivating films that aren't necessarily, I don't want to say necessarily challenging to a viewer, but it's creating like a sense where if a viewer feels challenged, then there's like this impulsive reaction to, go against the film. And going back to Scorsese, and specifically going back to something like The Wolf of Wall Street, I don't know if you've all seen that movie. And it's which I was very surprised to hear that was an independently funded, originally non-studio movie. I think it was picked up by a studio eventually, but we all are essentially following the hero's journey of Jordan Belfort, who is a horrific person, And like part of the viewing experience is, kind of you as a viewer being led on this, Joseph Campbell-esque journey of, someone, ascending the ranks, but completely morally and ethically compromised. And, that creates that sort of, conflict with the viewer themselves.
I'm like kind of over them. You have listed in our document here a scene from Barry, which is exactly that was the scene that I was thinking about when I was writing my notes earlier. But talk about an anti-hero that I was so over. I was just, this guy is so hateable. Um Even though I love Bill Hader, but he was definitely like a hero that I disliked more and more over the season versus Walter White, which I kept like rooting for.
Yeah.
You're a Bill hater.
Yeah.
That's a really bad joke.
I'm a Bill hater.
Yeah. Barry's one of my all-time favorite movies. And one of the, there's a phenomenal companion podcast where Bill Hader talks about the intention behind each episode and also kind of his bafflement that why do people actually like the character? Like, this character is terrible, and people
people love a male anti-hero.
and just, try, and also just ruminating on, what's true to the story versus what is essentially fan service to, what is a choice that's pointing outward for validation.
Yeah, I think it's part of cinema to have characters that the audience doesn't like but still roots for them. I mean, Scarface is a prime example of same thing with Wolf of Wall Street. And how many people are fans of Tony Montana and keep saying all the things that he said in the movie? You know what I mean? It's kind of strange. I think I love the show Dexter, and he's a serial killer. I'm still not wanting him to get caught for some reason. So I just think that's the mark of really good storytelling, and also a director or a writer being able to make the audience have empathy for the character, regardless of how flawed they are. And, they say that never judge your characters when you're writing, so that's part of it.
Well, it's also a product of audience evolution and creative freedom. Like, we've come a long way from people seeing Arrival at the train station and running out of, jumping out of the way like the train was going to come through the screen. And, we're past the Hays Code. We're past having those rules around freedom of artistic expression to the extent where it's like, well, if you show this, you got to show this by the end. I remember I did a paper back in film school about a bunch of silent movies and how dance was portrayed, and basically always the woman was, you could show her being free and expressive throughout and a bit rebellious, but by the end of the movie there was always one of two things: she either literally died or she had to become married and this transformed being that was done with the nightlife and done with the rouge. It was so predictable, and definitely audiences have evolved to where we want more of that, and society has evolved to where it's not as strict on these are the values and this is what we're going to make and this is the only thing. And there's a lot of beauty to that because we get such variety and more complexity. But technology and where culture's at really shapes the kind of media that we have. And I just think now things are so overwhelming. But if we're trying to compare and contrast movie musicals and the superhero thing, I think one main evolution or one main connection there is how technology's evolved. We sort of talked about earlier how, you can make these unbelievable scenarios more believable. And part of that is that our quality of life in general, on average, is better. Someone that is living below the poverty line now probably still has more access and quote unquote a better life and more amenities than someone that would have been middle class 100 years ago, just because things have become more accessible. Most of us can shower, most of us have electricity or access to electricity. Not everyone has to, there's so many examples. And I think that movie musicals obviously came as an outgrowth of sound technology. It was wow, the doors have opened. Now we can put sound in our movies. Let's make music in our movies. Let's sing. And it makes sense because stage musicals are popular. So we've got proof of concept. So now let's dance. And the superhero movies, I think, were inevitable because they were done before, but not as convincingly. And especially now with CGI and, the fact that you can't really CGI someone to be able to dance the same way that you could have a stunt person in a superhero suit do a bunch of stuff and then animate it. It's like you can't fake dance the same way that you can fake action scenes.
Though that's changing pretty quickly.
How? Tell me. What?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how like it's kind of it's like dance films in musicals definitely has like the lower budget, we're using more locations that we've noticed instead of painting a giant backdrop and putting that on a studio set. And we're using with VFX and literally just a giant green room, and we're investing all of our money in like basically a computer farm of like I don't know 100 people making like certain parts of a person's like superhero persona coming to life. Like my job is to focus on the little particles that follow him when he runs, things like that. Like it's insane that in this way the production goes to all of the heavy lifting just to make that come to life, where back then it was all like I need to go to my local craft store and get as much red paint as I can because we need to make that sunset glow in this when the artificial light hits it. So in a way it's the technology has improved, but I mean what you could get done with a musical versus what you can get done in a Marvel film, like that takes years. That's not something like a one and done. Like this is just something till we perfect it until someone is like, yes, that is exactly what I'm imagining when I see this. So in a way, I mean, we could say they're almost the same in cost if we, look back in time. I mean, like in a way, I would say not like fiscally they're the same price, but definitely tier wise, like that's a lot of man work, woman work, whatever work that needs to be put on this production. And yeah, it blows my mind. Like I just said, I focus on the little particles, like when they run. Like that's someone's job for like 3 years.
I animate Merida's hair.
Yeah.
Like just the curls.
Just the hair when it lays down.
Yeah.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. Though that also does, that's also called into question right now, especially in light of both the writers and the actors strikes, in that AI is moving at such a rapid clip that the automation of a lot of these a lot of this work, even very sophisticated work, is really in sight. Not just for everyone behind the scenes, but also for those on screen. Like I've heard stories like over the past 2 years of people getting those AI scans where you get like the full body scan, but not necessarily being clear as to what that was used for. And that, that raises a lot of, ethical questions in that, with Marvel, there's, all of those, the Marvel movies of, Der Ring der Marvelung or something. Sorry, that was a bad play on words. There's, days worth of footage that computers can use to extract information from. Like I would not doubt that at this point they could probably replicate or even like just spin from whole cloth, an entire sequence without the need to use any of the actors. I wouldn't doubt that it's that sophisticated.
Yeah, but it doesn't look good though. Like
not yet.
It's not there yet. It's definitely not there yet. I mean, we play around with that kind of stuff at work sometimes with just like, I don't know, like creative bells and whistles with words, and you can create something out of it with displaying one picture, but like it'll get there. I don't think we're entirely there. It makes me think of that one scene with what's that guy's name? Seth Superbad. What's that guy's name?
Seth Rogen.
Not Seth Rogen.
Not Jonah
Not
Hill.
Seth Rogen.
Michael Cera.
Jonah Hill. My bad. Wrong person. No, there's this movie that came out a couple years, like last year, with like Jonah Hill and what's her name, and they have to like kiss, and they never did, and they used AI to make the kiss look like it's real.
The
And
movie You People?
what?
Was it the movie You People?
Maybe You People. Yeah.
She didn't kiss him. She's like, I refuse.
Yeah. So it's like I would say we're almost there. We're not there.
I know,
We're not fully
but it's
there.
but it is very, very close on the horizon. I mean, it's very rudimentary right now, but I don't doubt for a second that.
I give it 4 years, maybe 3.
It'll be like anything with film. It's like when there's some movie or some idea that someone wants to make and they have to use this technology, someone will figure out how to do it. And we just don't want that to happen. We don't want someone dancing for somebody else unless it's motion capture, but I have seen people put someone's head on someone else's body. I've seen that for sure.
Yeah.
So that's happening already.
Boston Dynamics. Look at,
Yeah.
I mean, that whole horrifying, really, but like impressive.
Well, and I don't remember what year it was, but I remember seeing like some sort of award show where they like had a hologram of Tupac, and it's like,
Classic.
At the time it was like, whoa, he's here, he's alive, and it's like, how far off are we from all of the, cinema and other media that can be made from capturing someone's likeness, and it comes down to audience demand and audience accepting it, and like the four of us remember life before social media. The four of us remember VHS and DVD, and that being, believable and entertaining. And we've seen how things have progressed from more analog to digital. And even when we entered the scene, like, we were already pretty far down the technological evolution of things. And I feel like things are moving at an exponential pace where audiences aren't even going to reject this sort of thing. We come from a time when people are editing their photos and using filters regularly on social media just to show their real life. So I think that there's this perceived wanting to be real as far as like content goes and like seeming relatable, but aesthetically people still want perfection, and the social media dysmorphia and the way that it changes how we see things, I think we're very desensitized, and especially as far as the masses go, and as far as the next generation of consumers go as well. So I think it'll be interesting to listen to this conversation 10 years from now and be like, oh, we were so innocent. But I think that that's what makes me love those classical musicals even more, is like the labor of love, the actual physical material craftsmanship. And that's why I shouted out that CoverGirl scene, because you could very easily make that happen with technology now, in it. You could probably even make it on Canva, but at this point, back then you had to stretch your mind so far to accomplish these things, and not only think of the idea in the first place, but then actually work out the science of it and execute it in a physical way. So I hope that even as things move forward, we don't forget to remember those sorts of masterpieces and see them for what they were and the labor that went into them, because it's important, and we got here through steps. It's not like we just, the world was created this way and here we are with AI. Like, it takes people working towards a certain goal. And I'm going to paraphrase Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park, where we focus so much on if we can do something, we don't think about if we should. So hopefully we can continue to have these sorts of conversations and awareness and educate the next generation that maybe didn't grow up with the examples that we had, and make them aware that, like, we got here somehow and we got to pay respect to those that came before us.
Truth. I want to know, like, what's next for musical. I mean, I think that, like I said, the whole thing about Marvel, but I really do think that there's something on the horizon. I see, quote unquote, better dancing on social media than I see in some of these movies. And I see way better dance productions in Bollywood movies than I see in any musical that's from the U.S. in the past 10 years, probably. So, it could just be a matter of budget, or actually someone taking the time to rehearse dancers for long enough to make something new and great,
Western remakes of Bollywood films with
Wouldn't be surprised if
with,
that's
with Brad Pitt instead of Shah Rukh Khan.
Though, yeah. Though with RRR, which feels, it feels insane that this almost feels like the first. I guess it's not Bollywood, it's Tollywood movie that with massive crossover appeal. In some ways, because I think it aped a lot of aesthetics and effects that are commonly seen in Marvel movies that really, grab that audience, but then keep them in through the musical sequences. So I'll be interested to see how much of that continues to cross over.
Yeah, hopefully. I like your idea of Bollywood, Steven. Maybe that'll be the next wave. And kind of combines the massive production value that we're talking about that people love in these superhero movies and would bring back great dancing, because I agree. Like,
we need it.
Yeah.
TikTok's a thing.
Yeah. And I should also point out that, we didn't say anything about the stunt and the fight choreo, because that's the one thing that, like, those movies do really well.
Yes.
And those people are also, they're not dancers. Well, some of them are, but, like, that's important as well.
Yeah, they're athletes and trained movers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that choreo is very, very intricate, and they spend a lot of time doing it, But they could spend time doing some dancing, too.
Well, we're going to link in the show notes a few video essays that helped us get familiar with these multiverses and Spider-Verses and all the things we're talking about, as well as some musical resources. But just want to thank you again, Steven, for inspiring this panel and this episode. We were brainstorming for this season, things that we wanted to talk about. And like I said, your statement that you just kind of casually said in conversation has really stuck with me. And I think that today's conversation is proof that you really had a great seed of an idea there. And yeah, just thanks for making this happen.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
This is Frameform, hosted by Hannah Weber, Jen Ray, and Claire Schweitzer. Episode edited by the Frameform team, with social media support from Maddie Leitner and music by Mason Carlton. Thanks for listening.